And gents, to Chapter 9, Lesson 9, Finding the Number when a percent of it is known. All right, go ahead and pause your video, no matter what the assignment number that you're seeing. Take a look at your answers from page 255, 9 to 34. Come on back when you're ready. All right, I want you to picture where we've been and then figure out where we're going. Where we've been, find 34% of 90. We put 34 in comparison 100. And wait a second, both of these problems have 34%. Both of them have 90. So let me plant the seed here. How are these problems different? How are they similar? I want you to think about that as we carry on into our examples. No matter what the date, no matter what the assignment number, go ahead and pause, title your paper, and be ready for some examples. Come on back when you're ready. All right. Now I'm going to do example 1. I have 4 examples for you, folks. I'm going to do it in 2 different ways. I'm going to do the proportion method, which many of you are strong with. I'll do the equation method as well, which other students prefer. We have 20% of what number, I box in the question, is 15. So let me go back. As soon as I hear 20%, I'm thinking 20 compares to 100. Now, if it helps, draw a picture. 20% is, a fifth. And it says 20% of what number is 15. In other words, the part is 15. We don't know what the whole is. I'm going to go ahead and write that in its place. See, we know the part. We don't know the whole. You can use W, you can use N for number, you can use X. I think that's the hardest part. And P.S., some of you might choose to reduce 20%. After all, 20% is 2/10 or even 1/5. Well, why would you do that, Mr. Callan? Because I would argue you can now solve this proportion without using cross products. See, 1 times 15, there's a scale factor of 15. So we could also do 5 times 15. And 5 15s is, oh, I forgot to estimate. Don't forget to estimate. That's going to be a habit that I'm building up. Notice that 20 is actually just a little bit bigger than 15. So I don't know. What would you say? 90, 80? Notice how close 75 is to 80. Now, many of you will prefer the equation method, so I'll come over here where it says 20% of some number, I'll call it W, is 15. And we know we must change 20% to its appropriate decimal. 20% means 20 hundredths, and we multiply it by W. Now, by the way, I would argue you don't really need that 0. Okay, but I don't want a part of W, I want W. So let's get rid of that decimal coefficient by dividing it. 20% divided by 20%, 2/10 divided by 2/10, naturally makes 1 whole W, and that's what we wanted. Don't forget, anytime you divide by a decimal, you'll actually change the divisor to a whole number as long as you're fair to the dividend. And naturally, 150 divided into 2 parts is 75. As you can see, the answers are the same. So a student with strong skills can do one of these 2 methods, and students with the strongest skills could try both. 2 different ways to find the final destination. Let's do another one, shall we? Example 2. 3.5% of what number is 7? I'm going to use N this time. 3.5%, anytime I hear that. It is awkward indeed, folks, 3.5 having a decimal inside of a fraction, but we'll deal with that later. Of what number is 7? Well, imagine what this guy looks like, a tiny little part. So imagine how many 7s we would need to get up. It's going to be a lot bigger. Naturally, 7 is the part. We're missing the whole. Come up with an estimate, Mr. Callan. All right. Let's see here. 3.5 to 100. I don't know, 150, 200? Now, some of you may have noticed something. Yes, you could indeed do the cross products here. On the other hand, if you look, is there a relationship between 3.5 and 7? And as a matter of fact, folks, there is. See, all we have to do is double it. And in this case, interestingly, my estimate was dead on. Let's go into the equation method. 3.5% of some number n is 7. Now be careful with this 3.5%. If it just said 3%, it would mean 300ths, but it doesn't just say 3%. There's 3% and then there's another part of a percent. So in fact, the equivalent decimal is 35 thousandths. If you were to multiply times n, you would equal 7. Naturally, we'd want to divide by 35 hundredths and be fair to both sides to keep this equivalent. Apparently, I'm having a hard time writing divided by 35 hundredths, 35 thousandths, excuse me. Any number divided by itself gives us a whole, and so this case we have 1 whole n. Let's go ahead and change that divisor to a whole number. Being fair, we'll move it once, twice, thrice. So in actuality, what we would have to do is divide 7,000 into groups of 35. Naturally, 35 doesn't go into 7, but it does go into 70, and another 0, and another 0. Again, same answer, 2 different ways to solve. Onward we go to what I think is a bit more challenging. 150% of what number is 12? All right, as soon as I hear that 150%, oh, this is interesting. We have an improper fraction. We have something that's more than a whole. A little bit harder to draw this, folks. Let me bring this over here. So if this is 100% and we have 150%, wouldn't that number have to be smaller? 12 compared to what number? I don't know. What do you think? Estimate of 9? Let's find out. Now in this case, I will use cross products because we haven't done it yet. So let me go ahead and have that review, that little piece. First things first, I don't know, I always write the cross product with the variable. So we have 150 times some missing number n. And naturally we have 12 sets of 100. Now, I don't know what 150 n is because n is unknown, but I do know 12 sets of 100 is 12 hundredths. Let's go ahead and divide both sides by 150. If you'd like to make your life a little easier, folks, don't forget, yes, you may reduce by 10. So in actuality, all we have to do is divide 120 by 15. 1530, 4560, and then double 60. I don't know about you, but I'm counting 8, which is awfully close to our estimate of 9. Now I'm going to come over here because I think this is pretty important. 150%. How would we write this as a decimal? Remember that 100% is a whole, and we have 150%. In other words, it's 150 hundredths. Make sure you're going to the hundreds place. Now, some of you could argue you don't need the 0, and I would agree with that. But I just wanted to show very clearly where 150% should turn into its appropriate decimal. So 1.5 times some number is equal to 12. Let's get rid of that 1.5. Naturally, we would change the divisor to a whole number, being fair to the dividend, and oh look, there we have it again, 150 divided by 15, which not surprisingly will be the same answer. One more example, folks. I would encourage you pause your video, come on back when you're ready. Uh-oh. Did you in fact keep going? Because I wonder if this answer is going to stop. Here we go. 2 2/10% of what number is 8? Proportion, folks, 2 2/10 compares to 100. 8 is the part. Ooh, man, this is tiny. Think about that. Think about how small 2% is and how many 8s it would take to get the whole thing. Cross products. 2 2/10 multiplied by some number n will maintain equivalency if we multiply 8 by 100. 2 2/10 times n equals 800. Split it up, divide by 2 2/10. Now, ladies and gents, if you in fact did try to solve this problem, you may have noticed an issue. And that issue is, when we divide 800 by 2 2/10, we don't get a pretty integer. In fact, if you'll allow me to write this whole thing for a while, what I got was 363. Houston, we have a problem. It keeps going. Now, I will note in the textbook, it does encourage you at times, if you need, to round to the nearest tens place. So let me bring that in focus. If you look at the hundredths, if you look at the 3 in the hundredths place, we have to ask ourselves, will this be closer to 6/10 or 7/10? And naturally, the 3 does not round it up. So our final answer, rounded to the nearest tenth, will be 363 6/10. Now, if you want to see that the other way, which I usually do in blue, 2 2/10% of n is 8. Be careful here. 2% is 200ths, and then we have an extra part. So this really is going to be 22 thousandths. Divide by 22 thousandths, being fair to both sides to keep that relationship balanced. Change that to 22 wholes, be fair to the dividend. And naturally, if you divided 8,000 by 22, you would still get a repeating decimal. Therefore, we're going to round it to 363. Again, you'd have to go one more place to see if that's going to be 6/10 or 7/10. In our case, it was 6/10. So if you think about it, you look back, look at how all the problems are similar, look at how all the problems are different. You have two different ways of solving these. You have a proportion method, you have an equation method. You're generally given a percent, and percent always compares to 100. You're also given another relationship, and in that other relationship, you're going to have a missing piece. On the right example, we were comparing 8 to n. On the left example, we're comparing 12 to n. On the left example, we actually had a very nice integer answer, but not so much on the right. If you need, and if directions warrant, please round it to the nearest tenth place. All right, no matter what the date, no matter what the assignment number, carry on into your homework, folks. Bring some questions with you if you got them, and let's grow. See you.